Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today's conference. Here's your MC, Max Kahn, president of Coresight Research. Max, take it away.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Personally, I'm very excited to welcome you to our first virtual conference of 2021. We appreciate that you are joining us today, and we really worked hard to create an agenda that maximizes the value of your time. We would not be here without the generous support of Blue Yonder, and when they proposed the idea of having a conversation about supporting the customer journey, localization for speed to market and flexibility, we thought it made perfect sense. The timeliness of this topic was underscored yesterday by President Biden's executive order for the US government to buy Made in America. COVID has increased consumer demand for a seamless experience, requiring the right product at the right price at the right time. And today we will discuss how retailers can meet this need through a flexible supply chain that can deliver rapidly. I can't wait to hear from our participants who are listed on the screen because they are ahead of the curve in terms of delivering a seamless customer experience. As for format, we will start with opening remarks from Steve Lamar of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. Then we will hear one-on-one fireside chat conversations between our hosts, Deborah Weinswig and Sarah Clark from PVH, Dave Finnegan from Orvis, Colin Yankee from Tractor Supply Co., and Joe Preston of New Balance. Finally, Deborah and Joanne Martin from Blue Yonder will discuss a jointly conducted proprietary survey on the impact COVID has had on consumer behavior and what this means for supply chain strategies. All attendees will receive a copy of the report. This day will be an interactive conversation. Your questions and input will be highly valued, so instead of Q&A at the end, please submit your questions during each session using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and Deborah will ask them right away. Lastly, our guests have been gracious to provide gifts for a limited number of people with a variety of fun items. They will be offered at the end of each session, but you need to be in it to win it, so you must be present when the winner is announced. Let's begin, and I am pleased to introduce you to our host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Max. Please join me in welcoming Steve Lamar, who's going to kick us off today. He's the president and CEO of American Apparel and Footwear Association, also known as AFA. This organization supports more than 1,000 brands, retailers, and manufacturers that represent 4 million workers and $400 billion in annual retail sales. We've had many in-depth conversations with Steve on regulation, the evolving supply chain, sustainability, as well as Made in America, which is a hot topic right now. Steve, great to see you. Thanks for kicking us off, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Deborah, and thanks, Max. It's great to be here today with you all. And you asked me to share a few perspectives on U.S. manufacturing in the fashion industry. So let me just talk for a couple of seconds just to kind of help set the tone. First, there's really a well-established gradual trend to see more U.S. manufacturing in both apparel and footwear in the United States. This is something we've been tracking for probably about 12 years now. It actually predates even the Obama administration, it goes back to the Bush administration. Very gradual, but definitely clear and actually uninterrupted as well. Second, this is being driven by business cases. This is proximity to consumer, speed to market, limiting risk. It's not really about feeling good, being patriotic, being philanthropic, although that certainly may enter into somebody's marketing, but it's really about, is the business case there to do this particular manufacturing activity in the US? Third, with very few exceptions, we're really not talking about mass. This isn't about replacing what's leaving Vietnam or what's leaving China or what's leaving other parts of the world, but really about creating specialized production. I don't like to use the word niche, but sometimes folks like to do that. And in many cases, actually, it supplements what's being produced abroad. So using your US production that you're ramping up to supplement what you're doing as you diversify or change your supply chains around the world. And fourth, it's being driven by technology. And that's especially the case now as we're seeing this enormous technology growth during the pandemic. We're really also not talking about the jobs that left, a few decades ago. This is really new jobs that are emerging. New U.S. apparel production workers are less likely to be making the apparel and footwear and more likely to be building, programming, operating the technology that will then in turn make that apparel and footwear. So much more tech-heavy jobs. I also look at this as to refer to this, sometimes we use that term nearshoring or reshoring, especially when we're talking about the United States. People talk about what's going to come back. What left isn't what's going to come back. It'll be new stuff. And so that's why I use the term nearshoring to really talk about this phenomenon of more U.S. manufacturing in apparel and footwear. Just to leave you to a couple of concluding points. First, like we've seen in so many other things, COVID has really accelerated these trends. Be it technology, positioning your supply chain to be more responsive to e-commerce, or positioning your supply chain to avoid risk. COVID has definitely accelerated these trends. And then the second point, the last one I'll leave you with, is there's a certain amount of political gain to be seen by companies who are able to make more in the United States. Definitely, as Max mentioned, President Biden made a executive order yesterday focused on government contracting, but about made in USA. His political rhetoric has also talked about U.S. manufacturing. This is something really that happens with every administration. They always like to talk about more manufacturing and whether we can create more U.S. jobs, regardless of the industry. And so I think it's really an important point that if you can talk about your operations through that U.S. manufacturing lens, you will definitely see that's an opportunity to gain the attention of folks in Washington. Now, keep in mind, we have a lot of great jobs, 4 million jobs in the United States that we create all up and down the supply chain. So I'm not saying don't talk about those jobs or those jobs aren't important, but there's definitely sensitivity and definitely a lot of interest in Washington in hearing about the manufacturing jobs that are created from that as well. Not only in this administration, but of course in the last administrations we've seen. And in particularly if you've got PPE that you're producing, people would like to hear about that as well. So how all that's going to manifest itself in policy areas, of course, remains to be seen. And I look forward to hearing more from all of our great speakers later on. So thank you.
Much, Steve. We really appreciate your time here today. And now here's something really valuable that is new to our Coresight conferences. Steve has generously donated his time for an attendee to have a one-on-one meeting with him. And the winner of the one-on-one with Steve is Harish Singh from PVH. Congratulations, Harish. And thank you again, Steve. And our first fireside chat will be with Sarah Clark, EVP, North America Supply at PVH. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. And we'll turn the conversation over to Deborah and Sarah.
Thank you so much, Max. Sarah, when we were last in Washington together for the AFA Executive Summit, there was a significant and impressive focus on ESG for the industry. Can you talk about what PVH is doing in this area and what's happened since last March?
Gosh. Wow, what a year we've all navigated. First of all, I think that the last year has brought to the forefront so many things, just the pandemic, the impacts globally of that, and just watching that resurgence across different countries and how people are navigating that, and how we've had to navigate it with our supply partners as well as our retail partners, because it's obviously hitting everyone across the value chain, as well as our consumers and our associates, etc. And so how do you navigate that? Layered on top of that, we've had government action, especially Brexit, and then we've got also close eyes on that, and then also obviously the US government legislative and regulatory actions as it pertains to XJ province in China. So layering on that, and then the social injustice actions that we saw come to the fore last year as well. So I think just those three examples show you how we as a large house of brands operating in 190, I lose track, but over 190 countries now, with a large presence in China, a large presence in Europe, a large presence in America and other places, is how we have to think of that as we buy, deliver, ship product, talk to our consumer, deliver value for our shareholders, and think about how we operate with purpose going forward, and keeping, what's very, very important, Deborah, and I'm a big believer in this, and those that know me that I'm sure are listening, is it's very, very important in how we do business. And I love that there's such a focus on ESG, and just for us, it's very top of mind, and working with suppliers and retailers that have shared values, because when you navigate something to the extreme, as we all did last year, and we continue to navigate it, it's how everyone comes together and tries to deal with those social, economic, political issues in a way that is hopefully putting a better solution out there for everybody. So a bit of a general response to that, but it was a big question. Deborah, I think we're going to hear more and more on this topic throughout the year.
Well, it was interesting because at the beginning of 20, right, it was this idea around kind of sustainability for sustainability's sake. Yeah. And as we move through 20, it was sustainability for profitability's sake. And so I think that, you mentioned it, right, kind of working together and partnering, right, on many different topics. We found that there are ways to kind of do good and do good, right? I mean, do the right thing and then ultimately have an impact on the bottom line.
100%. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that shows that the top companies that really do believe in this and operate this way, and it's fundamental to their culture and how they think through a sustainable business model, that they are the ones that win and they create the shareholder value. So I think on so many levels, the traceability and transparency is a great example. I think if we talked about that pre-pandemic, there were some companies that were further on than others, especially in our sector in retail and apparel. But was it really, integral to the way that they needed to operate for all the right reasons? Or was it a sustainability, corporate responsibility, great to have, we're doing the right thing? I think that is an agenda that has completely shifted. And the emphasis and the need for it and the realization, I'm sure it's coming to the top of most people's priorities. Again, definitely in the apparel and retail sector, really having to understand all the way through our supply chains, which are extremely complex and being proven through the pandemic to be very fractured. It is not easy. I like cotton. I always like to give an example of making an omelet, Deborah. Once you take different fibers and you spin cotton and you're making it a certain staple length and a certain quality, and that cotton can come from it's a bit like making an omelet. You take 7 eggs, you make an omelet, and then you say, excuse me, can you tell me where each of those eggs came from? Which part of my omelet? So it's complex, and I don't want to simplify it, but to your point, I think we had focused on human rights as an industry for a very long time, and that, to me, the ship has sailed if people don't understand the impacts of focusing on that and the ripples of wins that come from quality, efficiency, better product, happier workers. That to me has happened, but I think the approach is now much broader. It's a much broader remit across so many different disciplines of our industry now. It's, to your point, it's integral to what we do.
You talked about the complexity and the fracturing. Are you seeing things become simpler, and what's happening in terms of, shortening lead times and just really kind of simplifying the entire business model?
I think we always strive as supply chain leaders, first of all, if you don't love complexity and you don't love solutions and building things, then maybe supply chain right now is not the career, because I think it's one of the most exciting disciplines you could possibly be in today. And I think more and more supply chain is not just a competitive advantage, it's an imperative to focus and invest, just like risk management today, I think will be a much bigger focus maybe than for more people than in the past. I would say it's our job as leaders to try and simplify as we move forward and create capability and operating efficiencies and practices. I would say we live in a more complex era than ever. We had a long-term strategy at PVH. We talk about low and fast, near and high, and then express models. And we wanted to work best, want to work best in class suppliers, less suppliers, to create those capabilities. Now you've got to have local for local. We have to figure out fractured supply chains. During the pandemic, we all got caught with inventory all over the world, and raw material suppliers were down in China, but manufacturers were manufacturing in other countries of origin, and so you had this lack of synchronization that we're seeing. We're seeing it with demand and supply. Europe's facing heavy closures, store closures again, and yet in other countries of origin they're back up and running. So I think that thinking through globalization, regionalization, local for local, and having a network and a more dynamic approach to solutions is essential. Like I don't know how long we will be called supply chain leaders for, because it feels like a very old term. It's no longer, links in the chain and linear. It's a messy network, and you've got to think through all these different solutions, because the consumer, even as we saw through the pandemic, switching to digital, still expects their product very fast, in the right place, when they want it, and at the right value proposition and quality. So I would say we strive for simple, but the complexity is greater than ever.
Well, and I think that, with PVH, the sole representative of the apparel and retail industry at today's event, with great brands like Tommy and Calvin, what additional challenges did that place on you in the past year?
What many people listening might not know, but PVH as a house of brands, our largest global brands are indeed Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. But we also have brands such as, we have underwear brands such as Warner's and Olga. We do Nike men's underwear. We have Van Heusen. So we are very complex in that we have national brands, we have global brands, we operate out of different countries. We have different retailers, wholesale. We have our own direct-to-consumer stores as well as .com. So what we've had to navigate is some of our brands that we sold in big box retailers, for example, like Costco or Target or Walmart, they were rocking and rolling during the pandemic. So then you're dealing with how you're feeding goods when you've got factory closures. So again, it's that synchronization. And just making sure you have the right inventory in the right place at the right time. And then our other brands trying to figure out how do we be able to get product to the consumer with that shift to digital and open up other ways, other methods of fulfillment we didn't do before. So for example, in Europe, the Tommy Hilfiger stores, we figured out how we could feed product to our platform partners like a Zalando, for example, and feed product to them, fulfilling from stores. We hadn't done that before. So we're figuring out as we go, and we're learning along the way. But we have to be very tailored, take learnings, and pretty decentralized approach so that we can be reactive to what the brands and that local consumer and our local retail partners require of us. So it takes all the words, the buzzwords we're hearing around pivoting, agility, digital is critical. So yeah, if that answers your question, Deborah.
Well, taking all those kind of words and thinking about, early on, right, buying trips were canceled, designers are literally designing from home. How did that kind of expedite the digitization or digitalization of the supply chain? And where are we now, and where do you see us going?
I love that you asked that, because I'm smiling. Some agendas you find that supply chain leaders are pushing. And I think shifting to digital product development, as we call it, digital go-to-market, was something we were advocating for with our technology group. We have the tools, our supply chain partners, extremely capable of it. But it was more of a push, and people still wanted to feel the fabric, which I understand, right? You want to feel the fabric. Pandemic hit, everyone's working from home. Digital was top of everyone's mind. Our retail partners were really open to it. Our design teams figured out how to work with it, and people started to adjust. So honestly, a huge acceleration, which for me, is fantastic, because it's something that we needed to move faster on. So I'd say the adapting to digital go-to-market has been critical to being able to continue our business from a business continuity perspective. But it's also a huge enabler, as we want to do local for local, to take out inefficiencies in the supply chain from a sustainability perspective. So again, it's enabling a strategy we had pre-COVID, but it's really accelerated it, which is fantastic to see.
So the consumer has also changed, right? How they shop digitally, as was highlighted on your most recent earnings call with, just the growth in, e-commerce and whatnot. How has the consumer journey changed? And then what are the implications in the near term and long term for the supply chain?
Well, I think that the great title of this event, I think it's all about, starting with the consumer and understanding the consumer and tracking the consumer and figuring out where do they want to shop and how do they want to shop and what are they expecting of brands. And I would say that there isn't one answer fits all. So again, it's about that dynamic solutioning. But it seems so far that most customers are voting for ship to my home, for example, but they want it immediately. So we've got to create. A lot of people are looking at local for local at an inventory level today, because in our space, that's easier. If you're looking at North America as a market, shifting to local inventory is probably an easy way to try and do it. So what are your high velocity SKUs? Do you create these micro hubs close to larger markets? But at the backbone of that, which is why I also love that you have Blue Yonder agenda today on the slate, is the backbone of all of this is end-to-end planning, digital planning, that visibility, that data, getting into predictive analytics. You've got to understand, it's not easy to say, well, it is easy to say, you just got to have the right product at the right time. It's local for local. But when you really get into it, it's like, well, how do I know what they want? How do I know when they're going to shop? And we have SKU intensive businesses, denim, bras, shirts, etc., where you have to hold a lot of inventory. So I would say there's a lot of complexity to work through, and the consumer wants to work in all different ways and maybe go to a supermarket and start to be able to pick up product that they've ordered from a high-end brand because that's where they're going to go to do their shop. So we're learning all the time, Deborah. I think it's an ever-evolving marketplace. It's getting expensive for everybody to try and figure this out because logistics is high in demand right now. So all of these customized approaches to getting that consumer sale and that consumer satisfaction and loyalty is tough, but we'll all figure it out, hopefully together.
Well, and also to your point, right, with typical supply chains, right, designed for big buys, what needs to change to adjust for smaller order quantities or more of a C2M approach?
Yeah, I'm curious to see from a consumer perspective and the sustainability agenda, do people start to buy less? Been a lot of conversations around sort of fast fashion and does that sort of trend die away and people want to buy more sustainably built product, but maybe less of it and move to that circularity, which we all hope that they will. But I think if we can move to, I think the days ideally would be gone of these massive batch orders, and it's much more of a pull model in terms of you understand what the consumer is voting for and then you make it, right? So, but everyone's on that. I think, I'm not saying anything that people don't know. Everyone's on that journey to try and figure out on-demand manufacturing, maybe small micro parts. But I don't think it's one solution. I think it's multiple solutions, and you've got to figure out what the consumer wants. But what we are clear on is they want it pretty fast, and they want it hopefully sustainably made in the future, and they want the quality and the brands that they believe, to your earlier point, I think work with great purpose and that they can feel good about.
I'm going to close it out with, we've had many questions come in from the audience, which I appreciate. Just use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. And so Chelsea asked this question: how do you see sustainability creating new business models?
Oh, such a great question. I could spend hours with you on that one. I think one of the biggest is the small base, but I think it's like 4,000. I don't even want to quote a percentage increase, but the resale market has grown exponentially. So I think there are many different markets, and that's what's difficult about figuring out how to build for the future when you want to build local for local, which really isn't fully grown yet in the US. There's a lot of work to do there, but trying to build for those new models, I think, is what people are trying to figure out. Buyback, designing for circularity, recycle. So it's going to be a huge focus on how we build for tomorrow. So absolutely, sustainability, I believe, is at the core of everything that we've got to figure out going forward from a supply chain perspective. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. We really enjoyed your insights and comments, and look forward to talking to you soon. And Max, back to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Deborah. And PVH have been generous to donate 2 gift cards, which you can use to purchase Tommy, Calvin, and other PVH brand merch. And so the 2 winners of the PVH gift cards are Anne, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Natunewicz from Colliers International, and then Kent Pellegrini from Next Gen Packaging. So congratulations, Ann and Kent. And our next chat will feature a conversation between Deborah and Dave Finnegan, Chief Experience Officer at Orvis. Take it away, Dave and Deborah.
Great. Thanks so much, Max. So I have known Dave for what feels like a short time, as he constantly keeps me on my toes, which I guess is what a chief experience officer at Orvis is supposed to do. But when I looked at the fact that I've known him from his early Build-A-Bear days as CIO, I realized we're going on almost 2 decades of friendship, which I am very thankful and grateful for. So Dave, as we are discussing how to support the customer journey, how have you seen the customer change this past year, and what has that meant to Orvis?
So what we saw at Orvis is this customers shift back to some of the basics in life, right? Some of the meaningful connections, a shift to go outdoors again, a shift to reconnect in a meaningful way to the outdoors, a shift in the way we thought about our relationships and how important they were. We saw a huge shift in dog ownership. You know, now you're at home, people are getting puppies, or they're now their office mate is a dog. And so we saw this movement into that space. We also saw a really strong shift into comfy and casual workwear. We had that part of our business, and it was on fire. So we saw this monumental shift in how we valued our time. You know, we're spending a lot of time digitally, we're spending a lot of time online, but the ability to escape that and the ability to have meaningful experiences outside of that digital connection was something that we saw shift pretty dramatically. That said, from a digital perspective, I would say that our customer, and in general, our humanity has probably seen a 5 to 7 year evolution all in 1 year in the way that we work, the way that we go to school, the way that we shop, the way that we entertain. We've had this massive monumental shift into digital in a really, really meaningful way. And it was already happening. That was the path that we were on as a society. But that, to Sarah's point earlier, that got accelerated during this time. It exponentially changed. So we saw this really interesting dynamic of digital coming into our lives in a much more meaningful way, and the desire to take a break from digital and the work that you were doing and all of the news and all of the things, and reconnect to the outside world. That was probably the 2 biggest shifts that we've seen.
How did you handle the spikes in demand, and how have you adjusted your business going forward as a result?
Where we saw the biggest impact in our business, the categories that did the most phenomenal double-digit growth, as you can imagine, is fly fishing. We're a fly fishing brand. We've been around since 1856, since right before the Lincoln administration, right? So we saw this resurgence in fly fishing that is unprecedented. The only time that we've seen anything close to this from a fly fishing industry is when Brad Pitt had a fly rod in his hand and was in the movie A River Runs Through It. That made fly fishing more popular too. But so we're seeing this massive shift. So our fly fishing business is phenomenally strong. We have local manufacturer for high-end, our best fly rods. So highly craftsman oriented, high quality rods and reels and things like that are made here in the US and Vermont. We saw a huge uptick in people wanting to do that. We also saw a huge uptick on people who wanted to learn how to do it for the first time. Deborah, you and I talked about having a little fly fishing get together for women in business in Central Park, where we were teaching women in business fly fishing. So we saw that as a way of people thinking, how can I reconnect? How can I add some balance into my life that's meaningful? So that was a category we saw was really strong. And the supply chain for us, fortunately, has been pretty resilient through that. It supported the growth that we're seeing. We had plans to continue to grow that business, so we'd invested there. and we've been chasing into that. So that's good. We also saw a double-digit growth in dog. Orvis literally invented the dog bed. The dog nest is what it was originally called. And that has exploded right now, right? More dog ownership. What's interesting is if you look at the demographics, we've got boomers and X, and we're reaching into a lot of millennials who are owning dogs and want to go fly fishing and looking for a cool sport that they can get into. We also see some massive movements from a equity perspective from different socioeconomic people and races getting into a sport that is primed for that. A lot of movement of women who are taking up fly fishing as well. So those are the two categories that we've seen on fire. And then on the apparel side, the comfy, cozy story, especially early on, like we could tops, not so much bottoms. It was clear that everybody was on video conference because, our pant sales dropped. They've come back since then, but especially early on, there was a big move to comfy casual, and people rethinking, how do I want to work, and what's the brand that I want to portray when I'm working? That's shifted a lot. So we've chased into those opportunities. Frankly, we reduced our inventories dramatically, just like Sarah described with having extra inventory. We went after that aggressively, and then we chased into the things that were working the most throughout the year.
Can you talk a little bit about there's oftentimes this challenge between the CMO and the CIO with regards to budgeting, to initiatives. With both of those kind of under your purview, how are you kind of moving things faster forward? And if we look at kind of sales in December and January, were there any interesting takeaways that you can share with us?
Yeah, so for me, my roots are in the CIO side of the equation. I was the CIO Council chairman for the National Retail Federation for a number of years. And as part of that council, I strongly believed in the relationship between CIOs and CMOs. The democratization of tech meant that CIOs and CMOs had to work together meaningfully because customers were doing that differently than ever before. And so that customer shift meant we had to be better at doing that. And we haven't always been good at that as an industry of working together. We have different priorities. One's a shorter term. Tech tends to be a little bit longer term of what they're putting in. So at Orvis, we had an opportunity to reorganize our teams, and we reorganized so that the CIO and the CMO role is the same, reports to the same organization, customer experience role. That allows us to really quickly align our customer experience projects as the top of the things that we're going to invest in. I had a strategy meeting with our team in DC a couple of years ago, and we were doing secret shopping after our strategy meeting in DC, just walking around to shops that we thought we could learn from and understand better from. And I was walking behind a technology person and a marketing person, head of technology, head of retail marketing. And the marketing person turned to the technology person and said, you know how this would have worked, right? In the past, we would have a strategy meeting, and then we would come to IT and tell you what we needed you to do. This approach is technology at the table as an enabler for strategy and business results. And so having that conversation way up the chain and having technology with a seat at it, knowing that digital and the technology matters to deliver on amazing experiences, that's been very, very helpful for us.
Great. We've got some questions from the audience. Do you see on-demand or just-in-time manufacturing as a must for brands and retailers?
I do. I think it's a bit of we're all chasing to get there, right? It's how fast we can scale that, especially in an industry like ours where there's a lot of craftsmanship that goes into what we're doing. So we would love to be able to scale that. We haven't figured out how to do that. I haven't seen anyone who has been able to manufacture on demand and still respond in a meaningful way to the customer's expectation of timing. So it's certainly where the whole industry is going. Well, we'll all figure it out together, but we're not there yet.
And then there's been some questions around specifically what IT software tools are you using, or, kind of however you want to address that question, Dave.
Just in general, the IT systems that we use. So we just had an IT steering committee meeting yesterday. We call it a business steering committee meeting, business and IT investment. That's what we call it. And we focus each of our projects. Part of our givens or our mission is to focus our projects on experience first. And so that means that we're going to invest in digital experiences before we upgrade the financial systems, which is important to upgrade the financial systems. But in our roadmap, we want to improve those experiences first. There's a handful of systems that we use. We use Salesforce on the digital side, digital marketing. Our ESP is Salesforce. We're using artificial intelligence from Salesforce with their Einstein product that is unlocking a whole new level of personalization for us. Our email program was a mature program. It's up 30%. So far this year, it's up 56%.
Wow.
In part, we're using AI to more personalize the conversation with the consumer, with our customers. And so we use a lot of Salesforce. We use Oracle on the planning side, on the back end, and we use Manhattan that we're putting in distributed order management as we speak.
And what do you see as, you think about investing in the 12 or 24 months ahead, what will be the most important investments that you make?
So where you'll see us continue to invest is on the digital experience and supply chain side. So this year, in April, we'll be rolling out a new digital experience that will be integrated into our email and social marketing ecosystem that we have. That's tied into our, we do adventure travel around the world. We do guides around the world, those types of things. So we see this opportunity to bring all of those things together on one digital experience. That's a meaningful experience. So you'll see us invest in that. That'll launch this year. We'll get better and better at it. This is an infinite game. It's not a place you arrive, right? It's a continuous improvement. And so we're shifting also into a model of every 100 days meaningful business value for our technology investments, particularly on the digital side. So what are the things that we're going to do that are going to drive business performance every 100 days? And so you'll see us invest there. We're also investing in the supply chain. We're doing projects with Manhattan right now on distributed order management that allows us to maximize where our inventory is. We already do reserve online, pickup in the store. We do ship from store. We do those types of things, but this allows us to take it to the next level with other delivery options to the consumer from the retail location. So you'll see us in the next few years focus on those two main areas.
Okay, we have a question from Rich. What type of investment have you made in your store team?
The store team for us, Rich, it's an excellent question. I'll give you a really quick story, indulge me. When I was at Build-A-Bear, I was helping to launch a store of the future concept. And one of my good friends was over all of the stores. And I'd been into the stores hundreds of times, observed how customers interacted, observed where their smiles, we did a process called smile mapping where we would map where people smiled in the store, where they were engaged. And so I'd done that many, many times. And what was interesting is my friend said to me, Dave, we get our highest guest satisfaction when one human connects to another human in the store. And I was like, this is the most digitally connected kid on the planet, right? This generation, they're more digitally savvy, but their value that they put in human connection was still extremely important to them. And so what that meant to me is sometimes when I tell that story, people think I'm anti-digital. I'm not. I'm centered on human connection because the human connected part is what differentiates it. And so in the context of retail, there's no better manifestation of that communication, that connection, than a human interaction at retail for our brand that aids our brand. Because our store associates are like guides. People are going on trips to Africa, people are going on trips to Russia, wherever they're headed. they go to the store as a trusted guide, and that human interaction is an extremely important to the manifestation of who we are in our brand. We also teach fly fishing classes for free at our store. So our store associates, we're launching a series right now of fly tying, fly fishing, where our store associates are part of the people who teach remotely in their communities. So it's extremely important to us.
Great. We've got questions and we're getting close on time. So I'll make this the last question and I'll bundle it together. If you can talk about what you're doing on blockchain to underpin transparency or where that is in your roadmap, and then any thoughts on RFID.
Good questions. Both of those are emerging tech for us. If we take RFID first, one of the places that this is less supply chainy and more IoT, when I first got here, we took a fly rod and we put a ton of accelerometers in it and we put an RFID chip in it. And then we measured its bend and its velocity. And we took that math and then we compared it. So we took it when I casted a fly rod compared to like the Michael Jordan of fly fishing. And there was a big difference in the math, no surprise, right? And so we thought, how can we use tech RFID, IoT that will help us to shape the product offerings that we have to help us make better products and better experiences. So we're just starting down that path. We think that there's an opportunity, especially for RFID in a high-end fly rod, that we also have a warranty that's 25 years, right? So let's talk about sustainability. Our fly rods, we've had people write us and say a polar bear broke my fly rod in half, or it got stuck in the fan in the lodge I was in, whatever it was, we guarantee those things for 25 years. So tracking that for the consumer and making it a value add for the consumer, super big opportunity for us. On the blockchain perspective, we haven't dabbled in blockchain yet. We're not at a size where we have a huge R&D team or that we're building our own. So we rely a lot on our suppliers like Oracle or Manhattan to help us with those types of tech.
Great, Dave. Thank you so much. With that, Max, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you, Dave. And Orvis has generously donated 4 gift cards. And the winners of those gift cards are Renee Hardwood from Ring Central, Andrew Fowler from Olam, Amitabh Malhotra from Omniway, and David Roth from WPP. So congratulations to Andrew, Renee, Amitabh, and David. And now moving on to our next session will be with Colin Yankee, Chief Supply Chain Officer at Tractor Supply. It's a pleasure to have you here, Colin. And Deborah, turning it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Max. So Colin, as we've discussed, I grew up in 4-H and Tractor has always been such a huge supporter of the organization. So I want to thank you. Yeah. As a company that's so used to taking care of others, can you talk about how you supported not only your customers with being in stock, but also being able to deliver products to them in new ways this past year?
Yes, I think Dave set it up really well around the customer experience and the customer perspective this last year, with people shifting and spending more time around their home, pet, families, workwear, living both digitally and then kind of escaping outside. And we've seen that at Tractor Supply. So for me, really a few things stand out. We've just seen this massive shift on digital engagement. So this time last year, there were capabilities that we had built and scaled, but we forecast would take a few years to reach widespread adoption, as well as capabilities that we had deployed but hadn't scaled yet because we thought it would take time for customers' habits to change. So there were really things that we thought would take 2 or 3 years to reach a level of kind of relative maturity. And that was compressed into 2 or 3 weeks. And since then, obviously, there's been 11 months of massive change in people's habits and behaviors. And from a supply chain perspective, really, how do we meet those increased demands? And it kind of parallels off of some conversation you're having with Dave. So I think a year later into this experience, the fluidity with which customers move between engaging online or in store, depending on where they're at, what they're trying to do, the product they're trying to purchase, is really, really amazing. And the scaling of those new customer habits has all kinds of implications for the supply chain, from forecasting and planning to inventory positioning to where the supply chain requires you to work at a pallet, case, or unit of measure kind of level. And that puts a lot of stress on the overall operations. But then it kind of ripples back into master data fidelity, inventory accuracy, all these other kind of things that are kind of core disciplines of running the supply chain. And we just heard this, from previous folks you've talked to, how important, how complex that is. So just like customer behaviors change massively, I think for us, we've really focused on the critical importance of having great talent and examining every element in our supply chain to be really resilient and responsive. We looked at how do we diversify our sourcing, how do we develop new sources of supply, how do we go out in the market ahead of time and secure capacity, how do we work with our vendor base in order to prioritize what SKUs they produce and what SKUs they don't produce as demand has really spiked. And I think the overall importance of supply chain resilience is just going to be an ongoing conversation for for this audience and for everybody for the next year.
In light of talking about these significant spikes in demand, how are you rethinking your DC network, and what is happening with flex space with longer lead times to get product to the US? Yeah,
I'm sure people on this forum are well aware of all the imbalances in the global supply chain right now, with the imbalance of containers between Asia and the US, and the fight for space for some of those long lead time items. As we've thought about our network, this is many years in the making. It's just accelerated because of both demand and also trying to build that supply chain resilience. We've really tried to design it to be purpose-built based upon how inventory behaves. So for our fast-turning, bulky commodity products that drive a lot of foot traffic, so think of, for Tractor Supply, it kind of grocery apparel would be like bread, milk, bananas, right? It's our animal food and feed that drives traffic. We really want to keep that product fresh, in stock. We want to keep those pallets out of the back rooms of our stores. Our store back rooms are very small. So we focus on just-in-time delivery, partnering with our manufacturers to identify places where we can put high-velocity cross docks and do just-in-time replenishment. That's leveraged into the omni-channel space as well, because we can deliver big and bulky kind of items out of those locations. There is such demand for warehousing space right now because of the shift towards e-commerce. It doesn't matter if you're reading from JLL, CBRE, Colliers, anybody, just a massive pressure on warehousing space that has other implications on labor and everything else. We've tapped into Flex, using their single IT integration that we have with them to then take advantage of kind of more decentralized 3PL markets, so we can use it for that just-in-time replenishment, but also we can look at overflow space or other kind of things within our network to help support that growth. And then kind of taking a further step back, open the aperture a little bit more, for those longer lead time items, we've just really looked at how do we manage a postponement strategy. So how do we get product here with the initial set of product, if it's a seasonal item, say, how much of that do we buy overseas? How do we develop domestic sources of supply? And how much do we order that initial set from that domestic source supply? And how much do we order replenishment to keep that kind of postponed allocation there and be much more responsive? So we've really looked at different tactics based upon how the inventory would naturally behave based on customer demand.
I think we heard from both Sarah and Dave in terms of, consumers' desire for, I ordered today, I get it tomorrow. How does that change your thought process around, kind of localization? And how does that also change your relationship between kind of the stores as, fulfillment, and how do you see that continuing to evolve?
Yeah, I've been with Tractor for 5 years, and I learned the saying from a former boss of mine is that, we don't have a chain of 1,925 stores. We have one store and 1,925 different unique communities. So we try to be responsive to the needs of customers in each of those communities. We are a needs-based retailer. So there are some common needs across our assortment. You're going to find national brands of dog food or socket wrenches, right, in every one of our stores. But you also find unique brands or species varieties of, say, animal food that reflect local needs, or an extended assortment of welding supplies if you're near, say, oil fields or a more industrial kind of area. So we start with just really trying to look at channel clustering and assortment optimization as a fundamental baseline. We have a very fact-based merchandising capability that allows us to look at different customer preferences and patterns. And from that information, we take all that intelligence and try to make better decisions about the breadth and depth of each assortment across that product portfolio. And we do that at a very granular level using individual store attributes, and then back that out to make as smart a decision as possible, like how much localization can we support. You combine that with on the direct fulfillment side, we have hundreds of dropship vendors. They give us hundreds of thousands of SKUs online. And then we've been on a journey over the last 5 or so years to really what I call activate inventory everywhere. So, the same DCs that replenish our stores also fill directly to the customer. We can do buy online, pick up in store, buy online, deliver to store, curbside delivery, drive-through delivery, same-day delivery out of all of our stores. So you combine a local assortment with activating inventory everywhere. And now it really comes down to the intelligence. So we just have to choose where do we want to use that inventory and how. And really quick story. We have a small facility up in the Seattle, Washington area that services our Hawaii stores. There are certain SKUs we only carry in Hawaii because of the salt water, right, and the salt in the air rusting things out. As soon as we turn that on for direct fulfillment across the country, we started to get information about customers who wanted that same kind of product in other places in the country. So our online assortment or our localized assortment can inform assortments in other parts of the country. Our dropship vendors can inform our assortment in the store. And then we've seen other categories that are slow returning, and we've given less shelf space to some of those things and moved more of those online. So it's this really kind of fluid, kind of unified commerce look at our localization.
And as the kind of key representative from the essential retail space on this event today, how, basically, right, the bus was moving and you were changing the tires. How did you change operations while the stores were open? And what did that also mean in terms of hiring additional associates, et cetera? Yeah,
it's been a rocket ship ride. I'd say, first of all, our response has been a reflection of our culture. So we are a very servant-led culture. We try to serve our team members who live in the communities, and because we are needs-based, we've really looked at the best way we can take care of communities often is by taking care of our team members so they can service those communities. We have aggressively gone out and hired. We started 2020 with about 30,000 team members. We ended with about 46,000. So very aggressive hiring across our stores and our distribution centers to support that. So first is just making it a safe and healthy place to shop, right? So we've taken over 100 different actions to make sure our customers are safe and welcome, to make sure we're compliant with any local regulation as massive as those changes have been, or specific as those changes have been. We really just tried to make sure that we're offering a place that team members are welcome in our DCs and in our stores.
One good question is, you see the customer moving towards video purchasing, and maybe even for larger bulky equipment.
Yeah, I see the question here where I think Renee is asking about Flock Party Snack Cake, which is we sell a lot of chickens, right? There's a little retail theater going on when we have our live chickens and all the other things in our store. So appreciate the question, Renee. We do. So with that digital engagement, there is the use of the app, the kind of show and tell. So there's a lot of product know-how. And it may not be the video purchasing so much as the knowledge transfer. So Deborah, her last question was really around, the team and the hiring. We hire our customers into our stores. they live the lifestyle, they know the product, they can teach. And with so many new people, I think as Dave was talking about, moving into that kind of lifestyle in the outdoors, we have a lot of new dog owners. We have a lot of new chicken owners. We have a lot of people who have moved out to the suburbs, and they need education. And so the kind of video purchasing for us is less about the purchase and more about the education. How do we transfer that legendary service out of that kind of one-to-one face-to-face environment in the store into a more a format that we can propagate across a larger population.
Can you talk about, and apologize for my tech difficulties, but
Yeah.
all good now. Can you talk a little bit about, right, attracting a new customer, and what have you seen in recent months in terms of customer behavior, and what does that mean in terms of this whole idea of localization and what you'll be keeping, what you're keeping in stores? Does that change based on, right, you're attracting new customers and re-engaging with previous customers?
Sure. It's a great question. We have seen our core kind of farm and ranch, more rural customer who's very familiar with Tractor Supply. They have just stuck with us from a traffic standpoint, and living that lifestyle. Their animal count has gone up, or they're spending more time at home and doing projects at home because they're there. They see it, right? So they may have a day-to-day job, but they own some land, and they kind of live that country suburban lifestyle. And they were doing projects on weekends, but now they're doing projects during the week, right? They're taking a break from their Zoom call and going out and fixing some fence. So that has definitely stuck with us. Then we have a lot of new customers. So I grew up in Los Angeles. My family didn't know about Tractor Supply before I started working here. And we've had people move out of cities and go stay with families or home ownership in those more country suburban kind of developments. And they've kind of thought about, how do I engage my kids? How do I teach them, backyard gardening? How do I, teach them responsibility with a pet or with a small flock of chickens? Or they're focused on more being more kind of do-it-yourself or self-reliant. And so there's distinct customer messaging that we're using based upon our loyalty club information. We have over 17 million people in our loyalty program. And that really allows us to communicate with them in a very personalized way. And then, going back to the assortment question, Deborah, that you asked, that helps us inform, like, what kind of products do they want in those local stores.
All right, I'm going to close it out with one last question. I know that Tractor has, had many initiatives in play going, let's say, into the early part of 20, and some of those have accelerated. Can you talk about Project Fusion and the side lot transformation initiatives and how those continue to evolve?
Yeah, so for, Deborah's very familiar with our business. For those of you who may not, maybe have never been in a Tractor Supply store, our store format is about 15,500 square feet. And we sell a variety of product from workwear and footwear to consumable product for animals to nuts and bolts and make model specific parts to seasonal items. And it's a lot of tonnage and a lot of big and bulky items moving through a very small convenience style format. We also have this whole side lot on the side of our stores that kind of house the assortment of that more traditional farm and ranch kind of product, fencing, gates, big tubs that are really intended for livestock, but a lot of people this last summer were using for homemade pools and jacuzzis. And we're looking at, how do we transform that side lot to be much more productive for us and a better customer experience? So with buy online, pick up in store, really accelerating, creating drive-through side lots so that customers can pull right up and the product can go in the back of their pickup truck. That they can go and have a shopping experience where they can build a project and have it dropped right into a trailer that they bring. So it really is a drive-through buy online, pick up in store experience that's really changing our store format.
Great. Colin, never enough time. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And Max, back to you.
And Tractor Supply has generously donated 2 Tractor Supply gift cards. And the winners of those gift cards are Keith Bauman from Brixmore and Rachel Ween from Ween Plus. So congratulations, Keith and Rachel. For our final fireside chat, but not our last session of the day, we have Joe Preston, the CEO of New Balance. So Deborah and Joe, over to you.
Thanks, Max. Joe, with more than 25 years at New Balance, you have a wealth of knowledge about this incredibly dynamic industry. And last time I was in your office, I think we discussed this ever-changing consumer, but I don't think we knew what was ahead of us. Can you please kick us off by talking about how your customer has changed in the past year and what that's meant for how you service them?
Thought I left that in 2020, so here we go. Yeah,
Didn't we all?
yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, obviously a lot of change has taken place with the consumer, and it really starts with the retail disruption that's been going on in the U.S. for a number of years. The number of square footage in the U.S. from a brick and mortar standpoint per capita is still about 4x what it is, for example, in the U.K. So this retail disruption has been accelerated by the whole digital transformation, and consumer expectations were rising. And obviously with what's happened in 2020, more than 11,000 stores were closed, and you know, you had a tale of two cities. You had essential retailers and you had non-essential retailers. But I do think there's a lot of positives that have come from that. And one of them is every retailer has accelerated their own capabilities of selling directly to the consumer through their own e-commerce, and have also figured out ways to make sure that they can buy online, pick up in store, or also curbside pickup in all of that. So ultimately, in the end, it's trying to meet the consumer exactly where they want to be. And in 2020, that was clearly that they wanted to purchase online. You know, for us, our sales in 2020, 50% of our volume went through digital commerce. And that's a combination of our own e-commerce sales, as well as pure play internet retailers, marketplaces, if you will, and our wholesale partners that sell directly online.
You know, there's been some concerns with this growth in e-commerce around returns, and especially, you know, anything that has fit. Can you talk about some of the learnings that you've had last year, and how will that change your approach to returns in the future?
Well, you know, in our business, footwear and apparel, fit is so vital. And, you know, it's really the holy grail, trying to find the right application for consumers to make sure they're buying the right purchase, so they don't have to buy two of one item. Maybe it's a small or a medium, and then return one. And, you know, as a consumer, I did all my purchases, or most of them, online, and returning was a challenge in many instances. So, but what I'm and so we've had this as a project for a number of years, and have some things in there, but nothing that I would say is really where we want to be. But I'm really excited because I think through the past year, there's a number of entrepreneurs around the world that are developing new and exciting and ways that will enhance consumers' ability to fit themselves in their houses before they make that purchase. And I think that will help with the consumer experience.
No, absolutely. And one thing I want to make sure everyone knows is about your quick pivot in April to PPE. You know, it was impressive to those of us on the analyst community, and then I think just to the entire, you know, retail and fashion community. Can you talk about how you did it, what the implications were, and what you learned?
Yeah, so we're the only athletic footwear manufacturer that has U.S. footwear production. And, you know, we talk about speed to market, or the ability to pivot, if you will. It is difficult when your supply base is overseas and with the lead times associated. And for us, you know, only a small percentage of our overall volume comes from within the U.S. So I want to make sure I clarify that. But back in March, when all of our stores closed, all of our partner stores closed, and our offices and also our factories to protect our associates, about 3 weeks later, our factories opened back up and began to produce PPE for the medical community and the first responders that were so desperate for it. And that was the perfect example of us being able to demonstrate, you know, the capabilities that we have domestically, and what that can mean.
And as you think about kind of, you know, local production and how you kind of fill a customer's orders just in time, and just making sure, especially with the exponential growth you had last year, how do you think about positioning inventory in different ways, and what does that mean for SKU rationalization or kind of SKU enhancement?
Yeah. So, in our business, there are just so many SKUs. If you think about, styles and colors, and then you have sizes, and we actually offer everything in widths on the footwear side of it. And then on the apparel side of it, it's always inherent with the number of SKUs, if you will. And then in April, I'll go back again to March and April, when all those stores closed, we were facing a tsunami of product that was on its way to the States with virtually no home, if you will. And it really was a great wake-up call, because we've been trying to trim back our styles for a year, and we've been making progress, but it really allowed us to kind of focus. It really rallied everybody internally to make sure that our SKUs that we were offering were rationalized. Going forward, using predictive analytics and things like that, we believe that there are certainly ways that we can continue to make progress to make sure we have the right product, at the right time.
That's very helpful. And then you're in the middle of a series of new technology enhancements. How will those, kind of continue to evolve how the company operates?
It's a great question. A couple of years ago, coming into this role, it was the number one priority for us to really change the way we operate. And it was obviously our tech stack. It was about making sure that the tools we had in place was smoothing out that consumer journey. I mean, we are a wholesaler. That's traditionally who we've been. But as we've expanded internationally, we became a retailer. And then in the U.S., we still have factory outlets and partner stores. We have about 200 stores in the U.S., but around the globe, we have another 3,500 stores. So it really has focused and changed us to make sure the technologies that we're putting in place enable us to operate as a retailer and also support our wholesale partners. And with this shift to digital commerce, which we have been highlighting for the past couple of years, our technologies are designed to allow us to do exactly that.
How does the role of the store change in your mind with what we've all learned in the past year? And does that change the number of stores or the type of store? How does that change your store portfolio and just the role?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. That we are undergoing an evaluation right now of not just our current footprint, but what we think our future footprint needs to look like. And traditionally, you would value a store on its P&L, on its traffic, and how much it was selling through the register, if you will. Today, we think there's a different way to look at it, and that's really to try to smooth out that last mile. And so we are looking all around the globe at key locations where we think we can not only have a commercial viable store, but also the addition of servicing that community to make sure that we are, again, meeting the needs of the consumer, how they want to get the product as quickly as they want to get the product, and to also smooth out that return process along the way.
Yeah, if we think about the where I've spent a lot of my career in footwear, but this speed element to design, how is kind of 3D impacting that, and what other technologies are making a difference specifically around design and really kind of the digitization of the supply chain and also kind of really shortening that supply chain?
It's so interesting in our business, particularly getting in front of retailers. There was an expression: no sample, no sale. And this year changed everything. And some of the technologies that we've been putting in place, one of is Modo, and be able to 3D render product. And, I just think of this past year where our marketing teams, our product design and development teams have been managing a creative process remotely. We've been operating virtual sales meetings, around the globe. And, today we're on allocation. So the idea that no product, no sample, we've completely debunked that myth, but it has been because of, one, the adaptability of our associates to be able, the ingenuity that I've seen this past year has just been incredible. And also the tools that we're able to present the product so retailers can see what they're buying. But think about it, again, half of our business is done through digital commerce. People are buying stuff online without a physical sample in front of them. So it's really another example of the way in which the world has really accelerated 3 or 4 or 5 years in just 1 year.
So based on that, how, you've had this $7 billion kind of sales number out there. How do you feel about kind of reaching that based on what you've seen?
Well, 2020 from a financial standpoint, the year was challenging. Our sales declined about 17% versus the previous year. But coming into 2021, we're a new company. To change the way we've operate, we've introduced agile into the entire organization. We've developed these 90-day sprints, which has really allowed us to put together a number of building blocks that has accelerated our growth ambitions. And so again, we're coming into this year, our order book and demand is really strong, and we're bringing on additional capacity that will be here by mid-year, if you will. And we believe that 7 or 10 billion over the next few years, and we're working out what those dates are, but absolutely, we believe that we're on a growth trajectory that we have never seen before.
One of the things, if I think about New Balance, that always is the kind of umbrella or the foundation is the incredibly strong culture. How has that gotten, the organization through in the past year, and kind of how has the relationships between the employees changed? And then as you've added new employees, how have you onboarded people so that they understand what's critical to the organization?
Well, New Balance is a private organization. It's owned by the Davis family. And you know what? We've always had a strong culture. We have strong retention rates, and so that part of it is completely rock solid, if you will. And we measure twice and cut once when it comes to hiring. We want to make sure that people that we're bringing in not only have the capabilities, but also are the right fit. And so we're fortunate that we've been able to do that along the way, but it's really a critical element. But I think for the organization in general, the lessons that we have learned coming out of this year, one is how connected the world really is. The second piece of it is with all the mental health issues that are going on around the world, that we all need each other. So this importance of listening, communication, and empathy is just so very vital. And we talk about it with our global leadership team. We talk about it with our associates, because people want to be part of a community. We're all part of various communities, whether it's obviously our family and friends, and could be church or school, and work is one of them. And people want to feel like they're part of something, and that's something that we try to promote at New Balance.
That's great. I'm going to ask one last question, which we got in the chat, just around, kind of sustainability efforts and, this idea of, as you're thinking about, supply chain and also new investments, how do those also kind of play into the sustainability story long-term?
It's a great question. I think there are a lot of top-down initiatives that we have. We joined the RE100, we joined the UN Fashion Charter for renewable energy, as well as gas house reduction in emissions. But really, it's coming up from the ground. Our designers, our developers, that's why it's so encouraging, it's so exciting. This is not something that you're trying to force change within the organization. You have associates that are really passionate about it and are going to bring us along the way. And so, whether it's packaging or materials or just basically the reduction of samples and what that can save, there's so many different initiatives that I'm really encouraged and excited about what that can do for the environment.
Great. Joe, thank you so much. We really enjoyed your comments and your insights, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Deborah.
And New Balance has graciously donated 2 pairs of athletic shoes for the giveaway. And the winners of the New Balance shoes are Carrie Kessler from Stitch Fix and Brian Ehring from Kearney. So congratulations, Carrie and Brian. And now for our final session, Deborah will be speaking with Joanne Martin, VP Retail Industry Strategy at Blue Yonder. Joanne and Deborah will discuss the findings of our proprietary survey. So welcome, Joanne, and Deborah, back to you.
Great, thanks so much. So it's been a whirlwind of a day from PVH to Orvis to Tractor Supply to New Balance. And I think Joanne and I just want to take the opportunity to summarize that and also talk a little bit about the survey that we did together. So Joanne, any kind of key takeaways from the day so far?
Yeah, I've had some great takeaways as I've kind of gone through, listening to Sarah as she was talking about the synchronization and the lack of synchronization between supply and demand and a lot of the complexity within the supply chain. PVH has such a diverse offering of products, and what they're combating has been really insightful and trying to figure out how they're managing through the disruption. Listening to Colin talk a little bit about kind of the supply chain resilience and the importance of that, and really kind of how they managed and was really intrigued about how they managed the diversification of their sourcing strategy and how it became a competitive advantage, quite honestly, for them, what it seems throughout this year, and really helped them to navigate. So definitely interesting. And then listening to Joe saying they're coming out a new company out of last year and how they've really been adaptive. And I think that really speaks to the resiliency of both the retail industry as a whole, as well as the response that most of the retailers have seeked out through their supply chains as well.
No, that's great. All right, should we look at what our survey said?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I think that if we kind of talk a little bit about the data here, we looked at kind of some of the challenges that we've seen in the past 12 months and what we think will have an impact going forward. So looking at this kind of expected increase in demand for domestically made product, and I love Steve Lamar's term, like the nearshoring, which I think is just a great way to think about it, and we'll definitely borrow that going forward. But what we're seeing in terms of the ranking of these factors driving the nearshoring strategies, what here surprised you, Joanne?
I'm not sure that I was necessarily surprised. I think one of the things that is most important and most of the businesses are looking to achieve is efficient operations and being able to manage those. So having better quality control and better inventory management is important. And when you look at the shift to online, shorter lead times is really important to get that product closer to the customer. So I actually find this to be in alignment with what we've seen as a move to digital, and seen a lot of synergies with what we've kind of seen throughout the channel shift throughout last year. What about you?
I mean, I think that we've always talked to companies about this idea around, just in time, if there's a way to, have less inventory on hand. And so more around kind of, I would say almost the P&L and thinking about, kind of driving a greater gross margin out of the goods that they're selling. I think what we're seeing here, right, is more almost, holistic, this idea around kind of quality control and, some of the other challenges here. And I think what we heard from, kind of President Biden yesterday, I mean, I think this will continue to change, in the near and long future.
I think so too. Do you want to go ahead and take a look at the next one?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
All right, so this is something where we can all just kind of ask ourselves, but what has changed in terms of how all of us behave and kind of what consumers prefer? I think that I've always kind of been about the experiential store and how can whether it's this idea of engaging a new consumer or re-engaging an existing one, and certainly kind of having sales occur that maybe were unexpected. But I did think that, kind of this idea around preferences around buying kind of in-store and online were a bit surprising. It certainly exceeded what I would have thought.
That absolutely shocked me when I saw that and saw, I knew the physical store wasn't going away, and we all know that, and it'll continue to be a piece of the pie. I wonder though, when I look at this, and if I were to interpret it a little bit, is this more driven by omni fulfillment and buy online, pick up in store, and leveraging the store for that immediacy, with a lack of final mile being fully mature within the industry? Or or what do you think about that as you look at it?
I mean, it was interesting. I think we heard from all of our speakers today around, the role that the store plays, and, whether it's around fit, like Joe talked about, or, how, Dave talked about, almost this education aspect. And I think we heard a bit about that from Colin. And then, with Sarah, right, this idea around inspiration from the store. I think that there's something, and while I know touch is, critical in the process, many of us haven't been able to do that in the past year, but I think that did. So I asked Joe the question. I mean, I think that did drive higher returns, which ultimately is not particularly sustainable.
True. I mean, when I look at, though, kind of the phone purchasing and some of those components, that was a little bit of a surprise to me from a commerce standpoint. And I know retailers have been aggressively pursuing changing the digital experience online for their consumers and starting to shift some of that experience. And I think maybe it's about timing to a certain extent. I know having real-time visibility to inventory and really adapting your online presence and being able to give customers more information prior to purchase about where to pick up from or immediacy has become one of the biggest areas of focus. And so I think as that continues to grow and the demand channel continues to expand, we'll see that number shift a little bit throughout the year.
What's something we should do, Joanne, is, because we asked about, share of clothing or footwear purchases made on the phone, we should go back and find out about kind of more the, basics, or, let's call it the essential products, because I do think that, if you're buying a tube of toothpaste, right, that's different than buying a shirt or a pair of shoes. So it would be interesting to kind of compare and contrast, and maybe our next survey. So let's go look at the next slide. So, this is certainly, I mean, I think we heard this today, the changing strategies around manufacturing and sourcing, and some of it, I think what's right, there's a few buckets, right? There were those organizations that had wanted to change. It just needed kind of a greater reason to. There were those who were like, our supply chain is in great shape. We don't need. And then there were those who were already in the process of kind of reevaluating everything, and it was kind of up for grabs. So how do you, kind of look at some of these kind of, I think the almost 67% around expanding local and domestic sources, certainly was a big number in terms of, I was surprised by the results.
Look, I think when you go back to kind of the conversation that Sarah had earlier about the disjointed supply and demand and wanting to be able to mitigate some of the disruptions to your supply chain, this is really in alignment with that. I think retailers really suffered from having that lack of synchronization last year. And so it's important to kind of bring that closer to the customer, but we've been seeing a shift for a long time with customers wanting product at a much more rapid rate, and that speed to market, along with the fact of the exploding cost to serve, right? And so this makes absolute sense in trying to reduce cost to serve, increase your service levels to your customers, and bring it closer to the customers. So there's a lot of things that this dovetails into from sustainability. When I think about it, you're going to mitigate risk. And you were talking a little bit about reducing order size to a certain extent and trying to do smaller lot quantities versus bulk. Having this flexibility and closer production allows you to contract that lead time. So I definitely wasn't necessarily, I was pleasantly surprised to see at how far we've moved the needle within a year, and a little surprised to see how high it was at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, right, another topic of conversation that continues to evolve already in 21 is around this idea of C2M, right? Kind of customer to manufacturer. So whether it's, kind of personalization, customization, but if you're really making just in time, and if, right, you get the order today, you can make it tonight and deliver it to the customer tomorrow, right? Whether it's, kind of micro fulfillment or these micro factories that we're seeing pop up everywhere. It really, I think it goes back to bringing this idea, like I always talk about, like shopping as a sport, because not only am I designing something that's made for me, I mean, it's truly made for me. And then there's the excitement around kind of, wow, right? You can see it being made, and then you're getting it in a period of time that is, kind of incredibly short, and you're not thinking about, oh well, I still haven't received that product, maybe I should go and order from somewhere else. You're engaged as a consumer. So I think we're very early days in this, but I do think it's going to change longer term how retailers and manufacturers go to market.
I would agree, and I think it dovetails into our next one.
Yeah, no, this has been really very significant. And like I said, I was surprised and truly around the kind of AFA Executive Summit last March, because almost every session there was an element of sustainability in terms of how retailers and brands and manufacturers, were thinking about sustainability, about how they measure themselves, how they hold themselves accountable. And, but there was also this element around cost. I think that what we've done is we've seen that there is this association now with profitability, right? Because if we can make less, it gets utilized in the time frame we expect. It's not sold on, kind of a markdown. There's so much that's happened. I don't, how do you look at kind of the survey results, and how does that change, how you think about the future, Joanne?
Yeah, I definitely think the one thing that is most definite is sustainability only gained traction last year. I don't think it mitigated any of that. And I was a little surprised by that, I think, in the beginning, of the importance that it raised, but it does make sense when you think about waste mitigation and the profitability, as you were saying, in that transition of profitability. Focusing on sustainability allows you to magnify your profits to a certain extent. If you can mitigate by understanding the demand of your customers, or being able to pinpoint where they're going to demand their product, you can contract that waste component. And that right there is going to drive profit to your bottom line. So I think this corresponds well with what we're seeing from that standpoint, and shows that traction. And customers are really gravitating towards it. It's a message that's resonating with them, and it's the converging of kind of the environmental focus and trying to keep that, as well as the profitability from a retail standpoint. And I think it's a common ground for both retailers and for customers in when they're engaging with certain retailers.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that, kind of pre-pandemic, we saw this, consumers willing to pay 5% more, right? If something has a hang tag, or is, kind of identified as being made, in a sustainable manner. We've seen those percentages in terms of what the consumer is willing to pay continue to increase through last year and into this year. And so I think there's also, it's not necessarily all on the retailer, manufacturer, brand to kind of, handle if there is a higher cost, the consumer is willing to share that. And to me, that's been a very interesting and I'd say uplifting message that's, kind of come out of the past year.
I think so as well. Why don't we take a look at the divergence that we saw between the two groups?
Well, this is, quite interesting. I mean, what we think customers want and then what they actually want are, oftentimes, quite different. And, certainly free shipping, we heard it was like table stakes for holiday 20, and, lowest price. Absolutely. What do you think about the rest of these?
I found it fascinating that the retailers felt that products in the US was kind of number one, and the consumers saw it as number 4. Free shipping, to your point, surprised me as the number 1, because I do view that as somewhat of a table stakes right now. And I do think that many retailers have changed over the years, and this is a core to a lot of their loyalty programs and a lot of how they do business. Lowest price was surprising to me, because I often hear the terminology value, and value is different per customer. It could be fabrication, it could be, how they view value is often different. So price was a little surprising, even though I understand the compression on discretionary spend during this time.
Well, and it can also be as they're price comparing, right, in terms of where they're actually buying. I mean, I think that with the free shipping, many retailers have a hurdle in terms of basket size. And, in some cases, I mean, I had heard things last year, I didn't, where, retailers were saying, we're seeing consumers put extra items in the basket to hit that threshold, and then they're kind of returning. And so they've been going through this whole process of really rethinking, kind of what that looks like. So I think that we're at time. So Joanne, thank you. This was great. Always so much to learn here. And Max, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you, Joanne. And we'll be sharing the survey report with everyone after the conference. Blue Yonder has generously donated a gift box with some sweet treats from Sugarfina to thank you for attending today's event. And the winner of the gift box is Sherry Harriman from Academy Sports. So congratulations, Sherry. And we wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Blue Yonder for sponsoring today's event. I think we've heard some great insights on how retailers can deliver the right product at the right price at the right time with a flexible supply chain that can rapidly deliver a seamless customer experience. The current environment is a strong reminder of how increasingly important it is for brands and retailers to be able to do so. I want to invite you to Coresight's next event, Understanding the Full Revenue Impact of Retailer Ad Platforms, which will be this Thursday, January 28th, and you can sign up on coresight.com. We hope to see you there. Thank you again, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.